Senator Gutierrez, for what purpose?
Just if the gentleman would yield for a few questions.
Senator Hughes, do you yield?
Of course I'll yield.
Well, thank you, Senator. I know you mentioned science earlier, and science is sometimes confusing to me. That's why I went on to law school. There's so much to it, right? I was also horrible at math. So I had to do something, so I became a lawyer. How do you like that?
I can identify.
Yes, sir. So I do have some questions about science. What is the force of this concurrent resolution? How does it change the law currently?
Since it's a concurrent resolution, as you know, concurrent resolutions are often used for the state to express its position on a matter. There's always specific legislation, like the bill we just considered, like the bill we considered earlier about driver licenses, or about birth certificates, or bills in previous sessions about sports, about protecting women's sports and girls' sports. So this bill, not unlike the governor's letter executive order, is expressing the position of the legislature on this topic.
Well, here's the science part. And so, did you study or investigate chromosomal differences in sex development in the creation of this SCR?
Well, Senator, there's been a lot of testimony before the legislature about chromosomes and about XX and XY and about male and female characteristics, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so what is Turner syndrome?
I beg your pardon?
Turner syndrome, are you familiar?
I'm not familiar with Turner syndrome, no, sir.
Okay, so you're missing one X chromosome. It often leads to short stature and underdeveloped ovaries and infertility as well. How does SCR42 affect people with Turner syndrome?
Senator, for folks with Turner syndrome or folks with conditions that is often under the broad category of intersex, I think the experts would agree that that does not create a third sex. There is male and there is female, and often children born with those conditions, there's not a sex assigned at birth. And once the doctors can determine it, then that sex is assigned, but it's male or female.
So what sex? So if you got
when it can be determined, it's male or female.
So if someone's born missing an X chromosome, what sex are they?
I beg your pardon?
Under your bill, what sex are they if you got Turner syndrome?
Senator, as you probably know, whether it's Turner syndrome or other conditions, physicians look at chromosomes, they look at organs, they look at what's there, and they make a decision and they assign a sex, male or female.
Are you familiar with Klinefelter syndrome?
I've heard the term, but I'm not an expert on it.
Okay, also an extra X chromosome, typically assigned to male, but typically, not always. So in essence, what you're suggesting, it's up to a doctor to kind of flip a coin then. If any of these things happen.
Hardly a coin flip, Senator.
Okay. Have you ever heard of a mosaic developmental sexual difference where an individual has two X chromosomes but develops male physical characteristics? Have you ever heard of that? A mosaic?
I've read about this category of conditions. I'm not familiar with that particular one. I'll take your word for it.
It's a syndrome called De La Chapelle syndrome. They have two X chromosomes like a woman, but they develop testicles. So what sex are they under this bill?
There's a list of conditions like that, and Jacob syndrome, Swyer syndrome, some of these we have looked at. In each of these cases, I bet your research will indicate that the physicians take a look and determine and make a determination. There's no suggestion that there is a third sex.
If any law was written that treated sexes unequally, would that violate Texas law?
Senator, I would use the words that the governor used in his January 30th, 25th letter. He says, sex discrimination consists in treating a member of one sex less favorably than the other, absent some pertinent difference. To the extent that the law recognizes there are differences. For example, health coverage, many insurance policies might require maternity coverage for a female. They would not for a male. So obviously those things are going to happen. But subject to that, this is about treating people the same regardless of their sex.
Okay. So if you have these people with these missing chromosomes or additional chromosomes, these intersex people, as you discussed, how about if a law was written that virtually erased intersex people? Would that violate Texas law?
Senator, I don't know of any law that erases people.
Well, we have a whole list of syndromes that you mentioned, a few more than I did. Some of them are here on my list. You suggested a few more. And, you know, oftentimes those folks are born with, we don't know if they're male or female. We call them intersex. So how does that comply? How does that jive with this notion, male or female, which is what your SCR would attribute them to be?
Well, Senator, that's what medicine does today. Patients with those conditions are examined, they're treated, and they are assigned a sex. In fact, the bill that the Senate passed not too long ago, Senator Middleton's bill about the birth certificate, it makes allowance for those whose biological sex is not determined at birth because the child, as determined by a physician, has a typical or ambiguous sex organs, chromosomes, endogenous profile for either male or female.
Oh.
And then once the determination is made, then male or female is assigned.
And that's what we're doing.
Those are the only
with.
two
This
categories.
is a kind of confluence with your SCR, and you just mentioned his bill that we just heard. So his law would seek to try to delineate between the sexes, say who goes to which bathroom and so on and so forth. So you brought that up now.
Well, this was about the birth certificate bill, but go ahead.
My question to you was, is there a protection in place, let's use that hypothetical, in place that would allow someone that felt that they were treated unequally to be able to bring about a lawsuit? Is there some protection in our Constitution?
Well, Senate Concurrent Resolution 42 that's before us does not create a cause of action. Does not give rise to a cause of
But
action.
I'm asking about a hypothetical. You brought up Senator Middleton's bill, his proposal. If it became law, what in the Texas Constitution gives someone a right and a cause of action to bring about if they felt that they were treated unequally? Is there a provision?
Senator, it would depend on the basis for their unequal treatment. As you know, the law recognizes protected classes. Federal law is a little different than state law. I think are we talking about the same thing? I'm not sure I'm following.
Oh, sure. I mean, we have a protection that's even goes further in our Texas Constitution. It's an equal rights clause under Article 1, Section 3A. I'll read it to you. Equality under the law shall not be denied or abridged because of sex, race, color, creed, or national origin. This amendment is self-operative. You understand that, right?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Would you consider yourself do you consider yourself an originalist when interpreting the Constitution like Judge Scalia, Judge Alito? Scalia's dead, of course.
Like a textualist, the meaning of the words when they're used, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So the Equal Rights Amendment in our Texas Constitution was drafted and adopted in November 7th, 1972. That's when it was approved by the voters. November 7th, 1972.
I believe you.
All right.
I wasn't eligible to vote at that time, but I'm sure that's right.
Were intersex medical conditions known before 1972?
I believe they were, and if you have information, I'd love to hear it. I believe they were.
They were. Androgen insensitivity syndrome, 1953. Turner syndrome, 1938. Klinefelter syndrome, 1942. Swire syndrome in the 1950s. How does your SCR, for that matter, Senator Middleton's bill, jive with the Equal Protection Clause, or rather the Bill of Rights, the equality under the law statute under our Texas Constitution?
It has no effect on that, Senator.
If Texas law only recognizes two sexes, Senator, when 600,000 Texans exist that may not be either gender, doesn't that discriminate against those 600,000 Texans?
Senator, folks with disorders like you're describing are assigned a male or female sex. Not always at birth, but they are assigned a male or female sex.
And to your point, you said it yourself earlier, they can always go to the courthouse and argue Article 1, Section 3A of the Constitution, but guess what? Under Senator Middleton's bill, they cannot do that. And we'll discuss that at closing later. I have no further questions.